G'day, Michael here. This video is about an awesome piece of equipment that I've had for nearly 2 years now. It's called the Lamello Zeta P2. Now, to give you an idea of how far Lamello goes back, when I was a youngster I started the trade in 1982. Now I'm also the son of a cabinet maker, and I remember vaguely, I can't remember the exact timing because I believe I was still at school at the time, so I can't remember if it was late 70s or early 80s. My father and I went to visit a German cabinet maker, and he had a Lamello biscuit cutter. It's the first I'd ever heard of Lamello or biscuit cutters. And of course Lamello invented the biscuit cutter and the biscuits. The machine he had didn't even have a folding table. It was basically a bit of a guide, plunged, and that was that. Shortly after, my father actually bought one, so I guess we were the first and second people in the area of Canberra, which is the capital city of Australia, to have a Lamello machine. So our history goes a fair way back, certainly in Australia's history of having Lamello biscuit cutters, and probably worldwide. We would have been among the earliest adopters of the setup. In any case, Lamello's latest offering in the way of sort of a joining machine is the same leap ahead again of everyone else as the biscuit cutter was originally at its time. So again, Lamello is way out in front. To show you how far in front, I have to actually just demonstrate. It's the easiest way. But I thought I'd fill in that bit of detail. So if you think it's a new brand to you, it's just because you haven't been educated. If you're familiar with it, you'll be confident in how good the product actually is. It's far better than perhaps you may be aware. Anyway, less of me talking, more of the subject at hand.
Here you can see it in normal speed. You saw that bob up and down. Now the same 8-second sequence slowed down to 10% of the speed. The original imagery was shot at 200 frames a second, so you're seeing 20 frames a second as the video speed now, which is certainly enough slowed down to show the flicker in the lights and everything. Alright, here's me moving as quickly as normal, only 10 times slower. You see the cutter go be pushed forward. It'll pop up and down any second now. There we go. That produces that the keyway, I guess you'd call it, or I can't think of a good name for it. That's the best name I can think of. It's retracting. Shortly, we'll see the same thing again, in case you missed it. Here we go. Pay attention. Here we go. Bobs up and down. Retracts again. Well, okay, that was that.
Always find this difficult. This is one of the original Lamello biscuits. This is a new one, but of course it's the original design. And timber being what timber is, I don't know if you can see that, it's quite crooked, it's not actually flat. Whereas the plastic counterpart is quite flat. You see the plastic is of course much thicker because of the type of machine. When you see it operating you'll understand why. The timber one is crooked, they're affected by moisture. This plastic certainly isn't. So you can use it as like a flat dowel as a guide to assemble, and it's also got this, I don't know, perforation, I guess you'd call it, to hold on glue if you needed to glue it in as a glue joint. Alright, it's also got a bit of a marking there, you may see, the centre line, to show you that you've got it evenly pressed into the joint. Right. I won't really be showing that. I tend to use this one just as actually a guide to assemble for the other fittings at hand. This is a cam fitting. You can see the hexagonal socket there. So the hexagonal socket accepts the Allen key, which is used to actuate that cam. Now of course that cam has to grab into something, and this is the counterpart to that cam fitting. They're quite complex little parts. They're not just, you know, a little lump of plastic. I don't know whether you can see some of the detail. There's quite a bit going on in these fittings. So I can show you the same sort of detail in the other part. They're quite complex. They're certainly not a 20-cent component. They're more like a $2 component. They're quite an involved part. Quite a beautifully engineered little product. Okay, now the trick that this machine has, now that shows it pretty well, there's this sort of a keyway that grips inside the cut. Now of course that's a bit of a tricky cut to make, and that's what the Lamello Zeta P2 is all about, is making the cut that will accommodate this keyway, so as to give this some purchase on the material. Okay, that's the Clamex. The next fitting is the Tenso. Now the Tenso is kind of like a very complicated clothes peg with some guiding pins right over there. So you can see that guide there, and same on the other end. Now these again look fairly simple, but even these have got quite a bit going on. Here's the counterpart. Of course they're made as simple, where am I? Very hard to hold this. They're made as simply as they can be, but they can't be that simple. They are nonetheless quite an involved little piece of plastic there. Alright, let's have a look at the machine itself. Mine came in this kit. I'm sure there's different combinations available. This basic box just gives you somewhere to store your fittings, and it actually came filled with fittings. This is basically for anything with that requiring that keyway for this edge. This is the stopper you use. If you're just using it for plain cutting and grooving, this is the stopper you use. Of course it has dust extraction, so you can work very clean. We also have this guide, this extra fence you can add to the machine, which you can use as a guide for referring in from an edge within a certain range, of course. So you have got some control as to where you are placed on an edge. Now you see these kind of things on other machines, but one thing that's really cute about the Zeta machine is when you're cutting a miter, you have the option with this machine refer to the inside face, okay, or you can refer to the outside of the miter. And frequently, in fact, I think usually, it would be best to refer to the outside. Now, the only downside of all of this is you have to, where are we? You have to make sure that when the cutter comes through referring to the outside, I'll put this in the vise, I'll give me something to roll. You need to be very careful that when you are using the outside of the miter, you're not going to be driving the machine through here and coming out the other side. So you do have to pay attention. I mean, that's a given in any situation. That you have to make sure the cutter's not going to go through your board. But here you may also, if you're doing something a bit silly, actually hit this part here. It is scalloped out, obviously, to give you some latitude, so you're unlikely to hit it, but nonetheless it's something you need to pay attention to if you're using the machine. Now we need a 14 for the Tenso fitting. Here you can see this was 9, this was 10, so my memory of 10mm was right, but I couldn't quite trust myself, and this is the result of overdoing it slightly. 9mm did that on a 16mm board, and 10mm is quite okay. So it would vary a little bit on the board, but this dimension set at 10 millimeters is basically your minimum on a mitre, referring to the outside edge. Now I'll have also two different angles of mitre. This one here, each cut is 45 degrees, so it will produce a right angle. And on the other example, I'll have two cuts at 22.5 degrees, which will produce like 135 degrees or 45 degrees off a straight line. That'll come clear in a minute. Anyhow, I'll get these things cut. So now I'll put the fittings in and see how they slide in. So that's what we put in this first side. Here's the counterpart. So let's see how they go together. The beauty of this setup, we refer to the outside edge, and the outside edge is very, very flush. We've got a little bit of latitude to be able to adjust these things slightly, like there's a couple of millimeters. That's now quite perfectly flush, both sides. See all that. Just lift you and move you around, there we go. So you can see that joint is basically clipped together. So you can imagine on site, they can be put together on site, no clamps. If you wanted to, you could put some glue in here and the fittings would act as the clamps for your glue to set. So it's a great way of also assembling an object that you have no way of getting a clamp on. So it flushes things up and it clamps them together, and there are no visible fixings from the outside. 16mm is about the smallest or thinnest board you can possibly join without any fittings showing. Of course, 19mm or a 3/4 inch board is a lot more tolerant. Anyhow, so 16mm is our limit, and I don't know about you, but I think that's awesome. These fittings here. Counterparts. We've got the ability to flush that up, won't need much. Okay, so that's flush. Now I could have put some glue in there, again that would be then a glued joint. But because we referred to the outside edge, the outside is nicely flush. Quite a lovely joint. I don't know about you, but that is impressive. Now, so we've got the two different kinds of joints. They're both miters, but okay. So we can pull that apart. If we're reasonably careful with how much glue we put on there, we should be able to minimise the amount of glue we need to clean up. We certainly have to make sure the whole joint has enough glue on it. Okay, so that's that together. As you can see, there's an absolute minimum of glue on that. It's a small bead. And of course, the flush. Quick around here, otherwise it'll set. And there we have it. One quickly assembled, precisely assembled glue joint, and it is a crazy angle miter, and it's already well, holding itself. So you can imagine if you had a large unit to assemble on a wall, you could steadily stack it together, and before long everything would be assembled, and Bob's your uncle. Now, anyone that knows Tassie oak knows that it chips very, very easily. It is an Australian eucalypt, very hard and very prone to splintering. But as you can see, the drill bit has produced a very clean hole. Very happy with that outcome. So even if the holes are visible, they needn't look, enormously messy. All right. So let's put our fittings in. Flushing. Easy pocket. Alright. So we get access to the cam from the outside weld with the Allen key through that hole. Okay. So there's a slight discrepancy there. Well, I can loosen that up. Flushing it, tightened again. Okay. Beautiful. Okay, so now we've got a very nicely flush joint. I hope you can see it as well as I felt it. There we go. I'll just change that focal range so you can see the edge all the way along. It's quite perfect. Beautifully joined. And again, it is removable. Just undo that. There we go, released. Okay, so it is a knockdown fitting, genuinely, in the way that you can take it apart again and put it back together. And of course, if you were to glue this up on site, again, this would give a stronger pulling joint than the Tensos do. But of course, you do need access to the port for the Allen key. Okay, well, that was that. We have the Clamex here on the right angle. Of course, it could be used on the mitre as well, but you still have to have access to an Allen key. The Tensos, of course, meant that I could just put it together, and no fitting to be found. So, to me, they're great tools. The fittings themselves are great tools to assemble things together, because they replace a lot of clamps and jigs and blocks and packers and all sorts of doohickeys that you might be trying to use to assemble a joint. And that's all because of the talents of this little beauty here, the Zeta P2. I certainly don't regret having bought this one. And considering how compact this unit is, it really does pack a punch for the size of machine that it is. It basically wins on all fronts. You have precision, you have speed, and versatility that, well, I can't think of anything else that'll do this job. Well, I hope you found that as awesome as I did. Yeah, I can't believe that, well, in one sense I can't believe it took so long for this to turn up. That, you know, someone, I would have hoped would have invented this before, but by gum, it's a good tool to have in my workshop. Okay, well, I hope that was of interest to you. Feel free to like, share, subscribe, ask a question, leave a comment. Yeah, bye for now.